New York City has always been a symbol of immigration, a symbol of opportunity, a symbol of chaos and control fighting for dominance. But this time, the storm didn't arrive quietly. It exploded across headlines, social media, and cable news with one explosive claim: Zohran Mamdani allegedly encouraging migrants to avoid ICE enforcement, while Karoline Leavitt pushes for a federal response that could change New York City forever. Supporters called it compassion. Critics called it lawlessness. And suddenly, America's largest city found itself at the center of a political earthquake. As migrant shelters overflowed and border tensions escalated nationwide, New York became the ultimate battleground, not just between policies, but between two completely different visions of America. One side said, protect migrants at all costs. The other said, the federal government must step in, now. And once those lines were drawn, there was no turning back. Zohran Mamdani, a progressive voice known for advocating immigrant protections, found himself under intense scrutiny after comments and policy. Positions were interpreted by critics as encouraging migrants to avoid ICE encounters. Supporters argue Mamdani was simply warning migrants of their legal rights, something many advocacy groups routinely do. They say informing people of their rights is not the same as telling them to break the law. But opponents saw something very different. They accused Mamdani of undermining federal immigration enforcement, claiming his rhetoric sent a dangerous message, that local leaders could openly resist federal authority. Conservative commentators labeled it reckless. Moderates called it irresponsible. And supporters? They called it necessary in a city overwhelmed by a broken immigration system. The result was predictable: outrage, backlash, and a national spotlight that turned a local political figure into a lightning rod overnight. And watching closely from Washington was someone ready to respond with force. Karoline Leavitt didn't mince words. A rising conservative figure and fierce defender of federal authority, Leavitt publicly blasted New York's leadership, accusing city officials of creating sanctuary chaos and refusing to cooperate with federal law. Her message was blunt and unapologetic. If New York won't enforce the law, the federal government will. Leavitt's push for federal intervention in New York City sent shockwaves through political circles. The idea of a federal takeover, and whether symbolic, supporters cheered her stance, saying New York had lost control and needed oversight. Critics warned it was an authoritarian overreach that could shatter local governance. But one thing was undeniable. Leavitt had successfully reframed the conversation. This was no longer about one politician's comments. It was about who controls America's cities, local leaders, or Washington. And New York became the test case. As politicians fought on television, real people felt the consequences. Migrants were confused and fearful. City officials scrambled for messaging. Law enforcement faced conflicting expectations. Should they cooperate with ICE? Should they follow city policy? Should they wait for federal directives? New York's mayor attempted to walk a tightrope, avoiding confrontation, while calming public outrage. But the city's infrastructure was already strained. Shelters were full, budgets were bleeding, and residents were growing frustrated. Some blamed the migrants, others blamed Washington. Many blamed local politicians for turning New York into a political experiment. Meanwhile, social media turned the conflict into a cultural war, with viral clips, out-of-context quotes, and explosive headlines fueling division. This clash between Zohran Mamdani and Karoline Leavitt isn't just about New York City. It's about the future of immigration policy. It's about federal power versus local resistance. And it's about how far the government is willing to go when cities push back. If the federal government can step into New York, critics ask, what city is next? And if local leaders openly defy federal enforcement, supporters ask, what laws still matter? America is watching because this fight sets a precedent. One vision says compassion must come before enforcement. The other says order must come before chaos. And right now, New York City sits at the center of that collision, a city caught between ideology and reality, politics and people.